Hey Three Forks family, Wesley Smith, your Director of Missions. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. You are about to listen to a vaccine listening session that was done on September the 16th of 2021. This was put together by Robyn Seamon with App Healthcare Consulting. She got together a couple of local doctors and a pharmacist to just have a conversation about the COVID vaccine particularly, but it was open to any questions about any vaccines. But inside the description of this video will be the contact information for the doctors and the pharmacist. They were all open about you being able to contact them directly if you have any questions concerning the vaccine. I want to be very clear that this was not in any way to try to force someone to make a decision about the vaccine. This was just information. We wanted to make sure that you had information from local physicians that we believe many of you have trusted for years to take care of you, and we wanted to give them the opportunity to share any information or to answer any questions. So feel free to contact me if you have any questions for me, but then also in the description of this video will be the email information for the doctors and the pharmacist. Please subscribe to our channel. Click subscribe, even share with folks. We're going to continue to upload helpful content and information for you and your church. If there's something that you would like some information on, please reach out to me and we'll try to get this information to you in some way. Thanks.
Okay, well, Wesley, I see you're here. I think we probably should go ahead and get started. I'm not sure if we're going to have any more latecomers or not. And so Wesley is the mission director at the Three Forks Baptist Association. And Wesley has helped send out the email invites and coordinate this so we can just, be just available to answer questions. I'm not sure, Wesley, if you know our different participants. Dr. Womack is OBGYN in town. Dr. Greg Adams is a pediatrician. And Spencer Hodges is a pharmacist at Boone Drug. So, I'm not sure. We're getting another Three Forks.
That's probably Jennifer. That's why I needed to sign out, because I knew if she signed in while I was on the association account, it might do something weird.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so just, to get started, I just still, I've talked to most of y'all individually, and I've really focused on trying to improve vaccine confidence in our area. And I really do still think that a lot of people have a lot of questions just that would be helpful if they could get answers to their questions in smaller settings like this. And our faith community is just so important. It's such an important value for most all of us that live up here that I just, I really, really want to see the faith community just be able to get questions answered and not have misinformation, but get, good solid answers to questions and just be able to express what they're concerned about. So with that, I'll just go ahead and let y'all start asking questions.
Wesley, let me, I appreciate you're letting us be a part of this and meet with you. And when I would encounter families that were hesitant or reluctant, and let me say this, am I a believer in the vaccine? I really am. Scientifically, I trust it. Every physician I know personally has taken the vaccine. My son is a pediatrician up in Indianapolis. And in Indiana, 80% of all doctors work for Indiana University. So IU Health dominates the state. They've not required the vaccine, but my son tells me that 92% of all IU Health doctors electively chose to do the vaccine. So that's not 100%, but 92% is significant. It's not like it's 50-50. Most physicians do believe in it and choose to do it. But I have two brothers and their wives who I love dearly who have chosen not to do the vaccine. And I have 4 kids, and one of my sons has chosen not to do it. So one thing that I've done over the last several months is I talk to families about the vaccine because the kids aren't allowed to get it. If I answer parents' questions, I've sort of asked, and I've come up with what I think are about 8 basic reasons families express to me on why they don't want to do the vaccine. And so I try to identify any reluctance on their part. What are their concerns, and listen to their concerns, and then try to provide answers. And, but I try to do it in a way that I'm respectful to the person who has the concerns. And the pastor of our church, and I take my faith very seriously, and in most of life, I see myself as being a fairly conservative person, but I'm very much believing that the science behind this illness, the science behind the vaccine, really warrants it. And somehow, the families, the parents, the individuals that are reluctant or resistant to do the vaccine are more likely to be willing to embrace it or accept it if they know somebody personally that they trust. And if you said, who is that? It's either their pastor, their physician, or their pharmacist. And in a sense, those 3 Ps are the ones who have the respect and the authority of our community. And we need all 3 of these. That's one reason Spencer's joining us tonight, and Dr. Womack is the 3 of us strongly believe that it's in the communities and the individuals' best interest to do it. And but a lot of times, many people look to their pastors as saying, where do you stand? What should we do? The pastor of our church in January talked to me about the vaccine and was in total opposition, not going to do it, and reluctant. And 2 or 3 of the associate pastors also were hesitant and reluctant. They approached me and asked me, and we talked about it. And 2 of them ended up changing their mind at the time. One never really told me what he did. But in August, Wednesday night, I was at church, and I was walking down the hall, and up behind me walked our pastor, and he put his arm on my shoulder, and he said, Greg, he said, listen, I want you to know I appreciated the information you gave me. I appreciated the way you handled this and the respect you showed. And he said, I want you to know that my wife and I have gone ahead and gotten our vaccine. So I think that's the way we all of us need to approach it, is that I had a grandma in the office this week in tears on oxygen. She had a mask on. She's got oxygen. She could barely talk. She would periodically have to pause and take a breath. She was recovering from COVID, and I talked to her for months about doing the vaccine. And she said, in tears, she just said, Dr. Adams, I hope you're not mad at me. I said, no, why would I be mad at you? She said, well, I should have listened to you. She said, I'm sorry I didn't listen. I said, no, I'm sorry you didn't listen, but I'm not mad at you. I said, I'd hug you, but I don't want to get it. I'm vaccinated. I said, I'll talk to you, but I'm not coming over there to give you a hug right now. My instinct would be to go to hug her, but she is somebody who didn't do it, who regretted her decision and wished she would have done it because she's so sick and having a hard time with recovery and still on oxygen. And yet my pastor changed his mind and went from being against it to for it. But I have 2 brothers and a son who won't do it. And so because all of us on this call are concerned about our community, we're here because we care about our the people in our community and our brothers and sisters that live here. We care about them, and because of that, we want to find out how we can approach them and look at this as like any other vaccine. And so we want to answer questions and give you the power and the tools to reach other pastors in the community, because in all honesty, a lot of times patients do look to us and trust us, but most everybody in the small churches will look to the pastor's role of leadership more than they would us. And so we want to be able to answer the questions pastors have about, what is this safe, and not just medically safe, but where did this virus come from? I get all sorts of stuff, and the answer is, it's unfortunate this virus is here. I'm very thankful for the researchers, the scientists who were able to develop this vaccine and do it in a fairly timely fashion to be of help. So I'll quit talking, and maybe if you have questions, or if Dr. Womack or Spencer wants to express why they're here tonight as well.
I think one of the questions that we hear sometimes is, people have concerns about how the vaccine was created. There's been several questions as to, its makeup and what was used in it. Is it ethical? Some of those questions that come to us as faith leaders is just a small beginning. So I'd love to hear kind of how you guys have answered that question, because I'm sure you probably haven't heard a new question yet, based on the amount of time we've been doing this and the number of people you've seen.
So I don't want to hog the thing, and I'm going to let Spencer and Beverly, but I would tell you I'm very pro-life, and the reason our pastor was against the vaccine was he had heard information that clone cells had been used in the research, and for him being sort of pro-life, he thought it was unethical. So the answer to that ethical question goes back to in the early 1970s. There were some cells from in Europe. There were cells from an aborted infant, and it doesn't say. We don't know if it was spontaneous and miscarriage, or if it was an elective. But there was a cell line created that they harvested cells, and those cells continue on. And in some of the early stages of research, not in the development, not in the production, that cell line was used. But I would tell you probably 80% of all modern medicines have used research along that line. And so if somebody's going to say, I'm not going to take this vaccine, then they ought not to be taking modern insulin, because that research was used in developing human insulin. The way this vaccine got here so fast was in 1982, biochemists were able to make growth hormone in the lab. Before that, if someone had growth hormone deficiency, they were going to be short, and there was nothing we could do about it. 1985-86, they developed insulin in the lab. From 1920, the year my dad was born, till 1986, if you were diabetic, you got your insulin from cows and pigs. They would go to the slaughterhouse, they'd take the pancreas, and they would take that pancreas and extract the insulin from cows and pigs. That's pretty doggone gross. And they did that till 1985. Well, in 85-86, the biochemists were able to make insulin. By 89, they were making mRNA. Now, mRNA does not go into your nucleus of your cell. Every day in our cells of our body, there's a nucleus, which is like the library, and all the information about who you are. The fact that you and I are bald and got hair on our face and our height and our eye color, that's our DNA. Who we are is our DNA. Now, in that library, is all the information. Every day, in every cell, that nucleus, the DNA, opens up, and a copy is made called RNA. The DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. The copy is ribonucleic acid. A photocopy or a hand list is made of that DNA, and that mRNA, it's got a message. It leaves the library and it goes out into the kitchen, so to speak, with the recipe to make Grandma's homemade soup. And that recipe is read, and every day you're making brand new growth hormone, you're making insulin, you're making what you need today, you're making brand new fresh air. You weren't born with insulin for your whole life. You weren't born with growth hormone. You have to make it brand new every day. And so every day you're making mRNA. And it goes out, and whatever it's going to make, it makes. And as soon as the message is read, it's like Mission Impossible. That message is gone. That copy of mRNA is gone. So in 1989, they figured out how to make mRNA. They were looking for a cure for cancer. Well, then Ebola came along and Zika, and they figured out they could use this mRNA to make vaccines. So they started using mRNA. Now that mRNA does not go into the nucleus. A lot of people have a misunderstanding that you're changing people's DNA, and you're not. It never goes into the nucleus. It goes straight to the kitchen, and whatever it's supposed to make. And for me, it made spike protein. My muscles make protein all day long. And so that message says, make this protein. So my muscles made this spike protein, and lo and behold, when it comes out of the cell, my immune system says, man, this isn't Greg Adams. What is this stuff? And it recognizes it like a foreign protein. So now my immune system recognizes it and says, I'm going to fight this stuff. And so from now on, if my body ever sees that protein, it's going to try to fend it off. Now, I think of a vaccine like a trial run. If we had a football team or a basketball team and you said, guys, you know, we got a game coming up October the 18th, and you don't need to practice. You show up for the game, and we'll have a good game, and you just bring your cleats and your helmet, and we'll be good. And you never practice, you're going to stink. I mean, you're flat out going to stink. So you got to practice. So a vaccine is simply a practice run at the real thing. And you get the protein, so your immune system has practice at saying, I've seen this before, and I'm going to fight it. So from the standpoint, does it change your DNA? It does not change your DNA. You are who you are. So the number one, it will not change it. How did we get here? How did they make this vaccine so fast? They've been doing this stuff since 1989. They made an Ebola vaccine. There's a Zika vaccine. They're working on a dengue fever for South America and Central America. They're actually working on a vaccine for Lyme disease. So they've been doing this research for years. They just simply said, what is the message? What message do you want to send? And the message is how to make spike protein. So it doesn't change or alter who you are. And secondly, they did not use clone cell research for the development or production of this vaccine. They did the initial mRNA stuff. They did do it. Now, I'm pro-life, and so I don't see this as advocating or being in favor of saying somebody's for abortion because they do the vaccine. I don't see that at all. What was our country, when we started this country, which I'm grateful for, I think there were a lot of godly principles behind the foundation of this country. We included slavery. Does the fact that slavery was there at the beginning invalidate our government? No. Was it wrong to have slavery? Yes. But the fact that we had slavery then, which is morally wrong, does not invalidate the principles of democracy. So even though the clone research in 1972, 74, I would agree was wrong, even though that research was wrong, it's not ongoing. Just because that was done does not invalidate, to me, it does not invalidate the benefit of the vaccine now. And so I tried, that's why my pastor didn't want the vaccine in January. And we talked through this ethical issue, and he went from saying, I understand it, and he he appreciated the fact that yes, the good principles of democracy are still valid, even though we didn't get it right at the beginning by allowing slavery. We got beyond that. And I think that the clone research that was done in the 70s, I can understand people that, in a sense, hold a pro-life view, see that as maybe a wrong then, but we're not ongoing doing it, and we can admit that was wrong, but that does not invalidate the merit of the vaccine, at least in my viewpoint. So, there are some people out there that say, well, what about, does it affect fertility? And let me have Dr. Womack jump in here, and she can address, she knows a whole lot more about that than I do. I mean, I know because I get the product. I can tell you during COVID, there's not been a shortage of babies. The disease and the vaccine has not, we had, I don't know the number of kids being born, but it's a lot. So let me have Dr. Womack talk about that.
And we always say life finds a way. So it seems like no matter what we may get into, we're going to always have babies. And Wesley, my very simple approach when people say, because that is one of the most common questions I get, is how did they do that so fast? You hear about vaccines taking 10, 20, 30 years. They did use a lot of pre-existing research that Dr. Adams was referencing. But then, too, because our entire world was being affected, competition went out the window. So all of the drug companies were able to work together. Labs from across the world were sharing information that they normally wouldn't share because they wanted to make a profit. But because we recognize this is so dangerous, these labs and pharmaceutical industries just said, we're going to pile in together and see how we can do that. And that teamwork is what paid off, so that we were able to develop a vaccine that does not contain any fetal cells or any products of a termination. And as far as ingredients, like what is in this, you can look up the ingredients, but the ingredients are not very different than some of the other vaccines that we use, with the exception of using the mRNA, which is just a technology that we've been given that's allowed us to develop this with pretty record speed. And the fertility question sort of is a product of, at the very beginning of the development of the vaccine, there was one German physician who's also a politician, and one man who worked for Pfizer and was disgruntled. They came up with this idea that the protein for the spike protein looks an awful lot like a protein that our placenta, our afterbirth, needs to have a baby implant. And my gosh, if you make antibodies to that spike protein, why wouldn't you make antibodies to this protein in the placenta, and could you cause problems with pregnancy? So these were just two guys that came up with a random idea out of their mind because they thought there was some similarities between their two proteins, but they were only 3% similar. They're not very close to being similar. And so, excuse my dog. So that idea then got taken over by social media and people who had an agenda, and it spread very rapidly. But the fact of the matter is that there is no evidence that our fertility is affected. There is no evidence that you can miscarry from the vaccine. There is evidence that you can miscarry from COVID. So right now we know the virus is a lot more dangerous than the vaccine. I'm going to pause just a second so I can get this toy for my dog. All right. So and the questions I get about fertility and then can you get the vaccine while you're pregnant? And absolutely you can. And at every trimester of pregnancy, and I've had patients say, well, what does my baby see if I get this vaccine while I'm pregnant? And the baby doesn't see anything because it's not a live virus vaccine. So some of the vaccines we do avoid in pregnancy, like measles and mumps and rubella, but the COVID vaccine you can get while you're pregnant. And we know that that's not dangerous either, because the baby doesn't actually see that. The baby just gets the gift of the antibodies that the mom makes.
So, Dr. Womack, is there much understood about, like, once the mother's been vaccinated, and then the baby's born, how resistant they are to getting COVID?
So we know the babies have protection. They have circulating antibody. If you have gotten the COVID vaccine prior to pregnancy or in pregnancy, you're going to have those antibodies circulating to that spike protein. And then your baby, because you share a bloodstream, your baby has those antibodies. So we know, we've taken blood from babies and said, do they have the COVID antibodies? And they do. So they do have some protection. Dr. Adams, you may chime in. I don't think we know yet how long that protection is. But you know, right now, you can't get a vaccine until you're 12 years old. So at least for these little babies, if their moms have been vaccinated, they have protection from a pretty aggressive Delta variant right now, which is causing some kids to be sick and lots of pregnant mommies to be really sick.
And my understanding is pregnant moms are actually, if you took two women 32 years old, the pregnant woman is going to be sicker than the non-pregnant. So pregnancy puts you at a higher risk. And so that's one reason we encourage, from the baby side, we encourage moms to go ahead and get the vaccine during pregnancy for the mom's sake, but it does help the baby. Now, afterward, there are some moms who've held off until the baby's born. And they want to know, can we do it during, while they're nursing? And my daughter had asked me, and my first thought last January was do the vaccine and pump and dump the breast milk. She called, she works at UCLA, so she called the infectious disease department, and the professor said, don't pump and dump. Get the vaccine for sure and keep on nursing. And they actually included her in a study, and she would express milk once a week and send in a sample, and they would analyze it, and the antibody was in the breast milk. And so if moms don't do it during pregnancy, we'd like them to do it during pregnancy, but if they choose not to, the mom should definitely get it afterward, and that antibody will help protect the baby.
Or you can get it just prior to planning on pregnancy, and then you don't have to worry about the during pregnancy. But I am totally comfortable with any of my patients. And, you know, I guess to sort of echo you, Dr. Adams, I am willing to spread my thoughts on this because I love my community and I love my patients, and I hate seeing the suffering that we're seeing. So if I can help avoid suffering, I'm going to do it. But I would tell any woman 12 and up, go ahead and get your vaccine. If you get your vaccine prior to pregnancy, then you're protected during pregnancy. Or if you want to wait, like you said, until you're breastfeeding, that's great too. Like basically whenever somebody's ready to walk in through that door, I want to be there to give them a high five.
Yep. Yeah, I'm pounding people all the time. Yeah. I give them a thumbs up. I say, "Good, thank you for doing it. Thank you for doing it." I give them a pound. I'm thrilled when people are willing to do it, and sad for those who choose not to. But I understand the reluctance. I understand the hesitancy. But I think if we can communicate this to pastors in our area effectively, because a lot of times people will look to us, but. And I can tell you, let me have Spencer talk here a little bit. Spencer's done a absolutely fantastic job helping this community. I mean, so Spencer, tell us all the efforts you've made, because you've done fantastic with this.
Well, I think I would echo what you both have said in terms of the confidence that I have. I was going to try to make a joke that getting the vaccine while you're breastfeeding makes your kids like a chatterbox, because I've got a 1.5-year-old that doesn't stop talking. So maybe that's somewhat true. I don't know, but no. I was one of those that had a baby who was during the COVID pandemic, and my wife breastfed, and all things are well. We haven't seen any problems and don't expect to. So, but no, I think from my perspective of growing up here and seeing just the hesitancy that's resulted from the vaccine on both sides, and just the division that it's created, certainly is just heartbreaking to see people be pitted against one another for the sake of something that's seemingly good, right? And I truly am a firm believer that if in fact, and again, like Dr. Adams said, there is no really proof that some not so supported decision from my standpoint of a termination in the 70s, if in fact that was elective, and I'm certainly a pro-life person, there is no reason though that God can't use something negative like that for something good. Now, I think we see that in Scripture all throughout, right? That He is constantly using bad things for good ends, and I think I for certain am a result of that, right? He used a bad person, and as people who believe in the gospel, we certainly believe that we are broken individuals outside of Christ, that we are no good, and that it is only Christ that makes us good. And so I believe that to my core, that He has made something broken in myself good, not in what I have done, but what He has done for me. And I have to believe that He has allowed this to happen through non-believers in the science community and believers alike, right? That there are people on both sides that work there, that work in these companies that have developed this for something like a little bit of common grace to all people, right? That He would provide a way that we could kind of come out of this, and I truly believe that. And I don't use that to manipulate what I feel like Scripture is telling us. I use that as a conviction of, I truly believe that this is something that God sees as a good thing, and not as something that is trying to do any of the negative things that is portrayed to people in the community. But it's certainly doing something to try to preserve people and their longevity because of just the destruction that we see that it causes, right? And so we see people in ICU, right? These are our people. These are our people, right, in our community that we grew up with, that we see, we live, we go to church with, who are sick. And the vaccine is not 100% guarantee that doesn't happen to them. But the statistics that we see is 90+% of people in the ICU are always the unvaccinated people, right? Those are the people who are the sickest. And even if you get COVID while being vaccinated, your likelihood and survival is just incredibly higher than those that aren't vaccinated. But I think what Beat and Drug has been able to try to message in all of this is just our willingness to try to see the masses vaccinated in the easiest way possible, right? So we worked with folks like some people from Samaritan's Purse and volunteers and just all kinds of people, Dr. Adams and physicians alike, all over the community to try to give the hand, to just be the hands and feet of what God has called us to, and we're just trying to provide this to the community. And so we want to make that as easy as possible for people to do and to get and to have access to. And so I'm certainly not at the level that Dr. Adams and Dr. Womack are in terms of my knowledge on things, but I feel like Boone Drug is certainly the ones really trying to help say, here it is, whatever you need and how we can provide it, we're willing to do that. And to be just a voice a trusted voice in the community, right? We've been around for over 100 years, and certainly the Furman, the Stacy, all those families are keenly supportive of it and want to see the community well. And so that's kind of my story and my viewpoint of it, and willing to expound on any of that if need be. And just really thankful to be a part, and I'm amongst some good company here, so thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think I just want to say this at this point, just echoing what everybody else has said. For me, it's like I have no agenda. I'm not trying to push something or make something. I want to eliminate the suffering. And I, many years ago, worked in Raleigh in a hospital in the medical intensive care unit and was very well acquainted with people on ventilators. And it's a horrible thing to go through. Even if you come through it and get better, you still are going to have some repercussions. There's no way around it. You're going to have just mental effects of being in an intensive care unit the longer you stay there. And also as a person that has experienced a very chronic fibromyalgia type situation and knows how much that affects your life and what you want to do. And I just, it's like when I hear the long-term effects of COVID, and, I just don't want people to have to go through that when there is a way to, this vaccine really seems to be proving itself out. That, like Spencer was saying, you may still get it, may still have the breakthrough cases, but it's very highly unlikely that you're going to end up in the intensive care unit or you're going to die from COVID. Don't know where the research, I've been looking at it. I think they're even thinking maybe the long COVID is not as likely to affect people that have been vaccinated. But, again, it's all about our community and just wanting to help our community in whatever way we can do that, because whether people get COVID, it's still affecting us all. It's affecting us economically. It's affecting, my heart just breaks for all of our healthcare providers because it's such an exhausting, long, ongoing battle that people are going through. And I just so want us to be able to make a difference. And we have made a big difference. There has been a big difference. But that, we can keep pushing ahead at this point in time where I think a lot of everybody were so tired and kind of just a little apathetic at times, that it just takes that extra push to keep going for the good of, and I've talked a lot of times when I've talked to people about improving vaccine confidence, that if just one, if our efforts mean that one person gets vaccinated that wasn't going to get vaccinated, it's worth all our effort because of what it's saving them and their family and the ripple effect of who knows how many. I was hearing something today, and I hear so much stuff, it's like, where did I hear it from? But a high school football player that got vaccinated and ended up like he affected 25 other people on his team, and they all, decided to get vaccinated because he had. So, there's always hope if we keep at what we're doing.
Hey, I was going to ask you guys, doesn't sound like there's as much division as it being played out in the media as far as within the medical community. Hearing Dr. Adams say that in some areas 92% of medical professionals are, vaccinated, but how are you guys handling that division, even though it might be minimal? among the medical community. I mean, I know that's one of the things that I've encouraged people to do is consult with their local doctor, consult with a pharmacist, and, and hearing and knowing that, through the years, many people have trusted you guys, and now all of a sudden they're calling you into question, so to speak, because they're hearing some other medical professionals that they ain't even met before have some concerns. So how are you dealing with that division, even among yourselves?
Wesley, I think in our area, so in Watauga County, 96% of physicians are vaccinated. Personally, I know one physician who's chosen not to vaccinate. He doesn't share a lot about why that is. And I don't know that he shares a lot of that to patients. So that's the only one person I know. Now, there are some nurses who've chosen not to get vaccinated, but I think that number is pretty small as well. And, I think for the people who I talk to, the underlying theme I get is we're afraid of what the future holds, which as a pastor, you are very familiar because 90% of people who sit down with you are afraid of what we don't even know, afraid of what's coming, or is not coming. And so, but we don't have a lot of discord. Definitely what's portrayed in the media and on social media, it's just not in our community. I think almost everybody is vaccinated, and the people who aren't vaccinated either will keep that to themselves, and the only reason I know it is sometimes they're my patients, or sometimes I see they have on 2 masks. And so that is the one thing I will tell you. The people I know who don't vaccinate maximize every other strategy to protect our patients and our community. So they wear 2 masks, including that really mean N95 that you can't breathe through. They are consummate hand washers. They socially distance, including like when they leave work, they don't do a lot with other people because they want to help our community. So I don't think, Dr. Adams, you can chime in too, but I have not heard a lot about, that tension. It's mostly with patients, and I never mind being called into question. Like when patients want to question me, or if I can't easily explain in a respectful and loving way why my recommendation is what it is, then I'm not doing my job, and I'm not serving the people that I'm here to serve. So that doesn't bother me. I'm used to that, and I never take umbrage to that. So.
There's a physician, I think his name is Peter McCullough, who has been on Fox News a lot, that my sister-in-law and brother listen to, and they always quote him. So I looked him up. He's actually an adult cardiologist, which means, and he's about my age. He graduated from med school and residency the same time I did, which means he's either my age or older, but that would mean he's probably never given a flu vaccine or any vaccine in his whole career, because cardiologists don't do vaccines. They let their family docs do it, but cardiologists are not in the practice of vaccinating anybody. And he's probably never treated an infection because he's a cardiologist, and the cardiologists always say, oh, you have a fever, cough, go see your family doctor. So this guy knows zippo about infections. He knows zippo about vaccines, and yet they pull him out and they put him on stage, and he's all against the vaccine, and I think he's for ivermectin too. But anyway, my brother and sister believe this guy, and I'm like, okay, there's somebody on TV that you don't know who's an adult who knows nothing about vaccines. 85% of all vaccines are given by pediatricians. Nationwide, in the history of vaccines, most vaccines occur when you're a kid. So who should know the most about vaccines? A pediatrician. And not only that, but in 1992, UNC came up and asked me to help them participate in vaccine research. So we have participated in about 28 different research projects over all these years. So I've been more involved in working with these companies than most pediatricians. And I can tell you these companies, everyone I've worked with Merck and Sanofi and GSK and any of these companies, all of them, we have done some research with them, and I can tell you they are very professional, they are very ethical, they really want to make sure their studies are done well, they audit us, they look at our data, they are so nitpicky. So what Dr. Womack was saying earlier about it was collaboration, cooperation between these companies, Pfizer didn't have enough capacity to produce all the vaccine. A lot of the other companies said, some of these companies tried vaccines that didn't work. And so what they did was they went to Pfizer and said, hey, use our facility, we'll help you make this stuff. It's incredible. The collaboration of these companies working together has been fantastic. Sorry for that background. That is my sister trying to call in to talk to my dad. She calls every night. He's 101, so she faithfully calls and talks to him. And I usually get on FaceTime and let them talk for a little bit, but I'll call her back in a while. Sorry for that interruption.
And Wesley, one more thing I thought of just to add. I was talking with Cindy Henshaw last night. She's our nurse that's the director of nursing for critical care in the emergency room at Watauga Medical Center. She's been a nurse for about 40 years, so she's seen and done a lot. But she told me that, and I think they've had 3 deaths from COVID this past week. It's been really rough. Things are bad right now at the hospital. But she said universal, like every COVID person that she's seen getting ready to be put on the ventilator has expressed regret about not being vaccinated. And either they've said, I wish I had, or I wish I had listened to my sister, my mom, and gotten the vaccine. She's even had more than one patient say, please tell people to get the vaccine, which is so heartbreaking for our nursing staff to see that, because these are patients who, and one of these particular gentlemen, their mother had convinced them not to get vaccinated. And now, could you imagine being that person who had talked someone out of a vaccine that ended up dying from the disease? So, I try to question when we see these experts on television, like, what is their motivation for trying to dissuade people from something that's so clearly beneficial when you live in it and work in it every day? And I had read that, several reports that people express regret at the last minute. But Cindy said that's really happening, like 100% of the time. It's one of the last things that people are able to vocalize. It's sad, but it's powerful.
I have a couple questions. Some were already answered, but I have a friend who has a child who's autistic, so they're really hesitant to get the vaccine themselves or even let him get it. And I didn't know what to say to her. Although I did tell her that I was vaccinated because it was recommended by my physician.
So on the question of, certainly we don't understand what triggers autism to begin with. We definitely have seen an increase. I've been doing this 40 years, and I can tell you there's more autism now than there was 40 years ago. I'm concerned about autism. I see it. I honestly don't think the vaccines are the cause. I like to do volunteer work, and I've worked in South America and Central America and Africa. And when I go to those places, I'm seeing, sometimes I go to orphanages where there'll be 200 or 300 or 400 kids, and none of the kids have autism. None of them. And yet they're vaccinated. So something's going on in this country and in Europe and in Australia. It's leading to autism. I honestly don't think it's the vaccines. I do think autistic kids respond to vaccines differently, although I don't think the vaccines trigger autism. And I'm very sympathetic if a parent says to me, my kid's autistic, I'd rather not do a vaccine. I won't refuse to see them. I will say I understand. On this one, because probably the guess is that 85 to 92% of all the people in the world are either going to get vaccinated or get the disease. Ultimately, there's no escaping this virus. And so eventually people will get it. I would much rather have that autistic kid get the vaccine and be protected, because I'm not sure how well that child would do with COVID. Now, right now the vaccine is only 12 and older. It's not for kids under 12. They will be reviewing that and maybe considering it soon. One of the reasons I'm for adults getting the vaccine is this. The more adults that step up and get the vaccine, the less likely kids need the vaccine. If we could get as many people immunized as possible, each person that gets COVID, on average right now, not with the alpha strain, last year, one person would infect 2 people. This year, each person that gets COVID will infect 4 people. Jonathan Edwards, great American theologian, was willing to get the smallpox vaccine because he wanted to protect other people. Now, one of the questions that has come up in terms of theology, or I have a brother who says, God knows my days, and my days are numbered, and that's true. I believe that. I just don't want my last day to be on a ventilator for 2 weeks, and God can take me some other way. I don't want to be laying there with the tube down my throat. I'm not worried about how many days I got, but I do want my days to be good days. My son says, well, yeah, but I don't like government mandates. Seat belts, motorcycle helmets, wheelchair ramps, paying your taxes are government mandates. So for whatever reason people push back, there's always, I think, a good solid answer. And the answer on, if they say we don't want to do our autistic kid, then everybody around that kid should get the vaccine to protect that kid.
Well, she won't get it either, the mother.
Right. So, but she need, the appeal has got to be, listen, if you're worried about your son getting it, and you should be worried, if you're not going to give your son the vaccine, then you and everybody else ought to do the vaccine to protect him.
I would agree, Sandy, that you would tell her that she would be acting like a shield if she got vaccinated, and if her husband was to get vaccinated. Anybody who lived in the home with the autistic child, they would all be acting like a shield to protect that child from the COVID virus, and then he may not necessarily have to be vaccinated. Mm-hmm. But it's coming back to that. There are some things we can't do or aren't willing to do, so what can we do? If that vaccine is a hard no for the little guy, let's wear masks all the time, let's wash our hands, let's don't go out and about. But there's nothing as good as that vaccine to protect him.
It's interesting, Dr. Adams, that you mentioned government mandates, because that was one of my other questions. Because my friend is like, I just don't trust something that's pushed so hard by the government. And
I understand the hesitancy. This has been a really tough couple of years in a couple of ways before COVID even got started. the social unrest. There have been so many issues over the last couple of years, and there's a lot of social unrest. Last time I saw anything like this was 1968, and this is way worse than 68, but that wasn't a very fun year. That's the year Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King were assassinated, and riots, and Watts burned, and race riots, and protesting the Vietnam War. It was a bad year, but nothing like this. And that was 1 year, not 2 years of it. So, I approach this purely from a science standpoint. Is the vaccine, can we trust the vaccine? And the answer is I do. I personally do trust it. I think it's wise. Dr. Womack referred to what we're seeing locally. People, even young people, 30s, getting this and dying. Johnson City, I had the numbers from August the 25th. 280 some patients in the hospital. 259 were unimmunized. 22 were vaccinated. So 281 with COVID in the hospital. Less than 10% vaccinated. 90 some percent. In the ICU, 71 were in the ICU. 1 vaccinated, 70 not. Of those 70, 49 were on ventilators. 1 of them had been vaccinated, was on a ventilator. 48 were not. If you look at the numbers, the vaccine is not going to save everybody's life, but it's going to save the lives of 99% of people that get it, and it's going to prevent 97% of hospitalizations, 97% of being on a ventilator. Could I get COVID still? Yes. Am I as likely to die or be on a ventilator as my brothers? The answer is no. I would love my brothers to get this vaccine, but they refuse. I just have to love them. Because they're my brothers, I can say they're idiots, but I can still love them. I don't call everybody else an idiot, but since they're my brothers, I can say that. I don't call my son an idiot. I just wish he would open his eyes. I think we need to reach out to everybody and love them and listen to them. But there are good answers that we have for every objection. And we need to ask, what is your hesitancy? Tell me what is it that's holding you back? Help me understand it, and then gently offer them an answer and an explanation, and hope and pray. And our appeal tonight is for all of you to help us reach the community of faith, because there are many people in this area are looking to our faith leaders, our pastors, to provide answers and help us get to a place of comfort of staying okay. Whether it's your gerbil biting you or your golden your Rottweiler, they're going to hurt, but the Rottweiler is going to hurt a lot more than that gerbil. I'd much rather have a little 24 hours of fever and reaction to the vaccine than 2 weeks on a ventilator.
Thank you.
Dr. Adams, if it makes you feel better, my brother and sister neither got vaccinated, and they both got COVID. And my brother has now agreed to get vaccinated, but my sister will not. And I have asked her to speak to every person she respects, and I think she respects me, but she still has questions. She told me she was going to talk to her pharmacist that she trusted, but last I heard, she's still nay on the vaccine. So I don't love her any less, but it just makes me worry a whole lot more for her.
Yep.
If I may, I have a question that's kind of on the opposite end, not necessarily vaccine reluctance, but I'm kind of wondering when the booster shots might be available. I don't qualify for it now, but do have an underlying condition that makes me slightly more susceptible to COVID. So just kind of wondering if any of you had any indication of when that might be available, and how important does that seem to be?
I think that we're supposed to hear word tomorrow, and Spencer may be a little more able to tell us details, but I was on a similar meeting for ASU last night, and Sean Burrows, who's our director of pharmacy for our healthcare system, he said that tomorrow the FDA is supposed to release some additional guidelines about when to start doing boosters for the general public. Right now, if you have any immunocompromise, and that doesn't have to be a major diagnosis, but if you are more susceptible to infection, you can get your COVID booster with no questions asked. You can go anywhere that the vaccine's offered and say, I'd like to get my booster, have your card with you, and you can get your vaccine. And you don't have to tell anybody what your healthcare issue is, so that's available to you if you're worried. But for the general public, the answer is we may have more information tomorrow, but we're all still waiting.
Okay. With the guidelines I saw actually on the Big Drug website, I didn't qualify under any of those guidelines for getting a booster at this time, so I was just kind of wondering on that, so thank you.
For what it's worth, the people that I've talked to that have done a booster have all said, most people would say they had some reaction with the second dose, fever, headache, didn't feel well. Everybody I've talked to that's done the third dose, it was nothing, like nothing. It was, I did a third dose. Go ahead.
I really didn't have much of a reaction with either of the first two, which I also find a little bit worrying because now I wonder if it actually worked. But
and there is good data out now that you don't have to have side effects to have a healthy immune response to the vaccine. So even if you sail through and have no symptoms, you still have those good antibodies. I will disclose, I've had my third booster, and I was quite sick with my second shot, but my third one was very minimal compared to my second. So, and I agree with Dr. Adams. That's what we're hearing from a lot of people who get their third. Okay.
Hey, I just want to say thank you to all of you who have taken your time this evening. This has been some great information. I appreciate Robyn getting this together for us. One of the things when she and I talk is, we don't want to appear to be trying to push people one way or another, but one of the things I just wanted to make sure people have is good quality information from people that they trust. And I feel like you all have done an excellent job this evening. So thank you so much. I want to continue. I mean, that's one of the things I tell people all the time when they ask me. I'm like, look, I'm not a medical professional. You need to go see your doctor. And so that's kind of the way I've left it. But I do tell them, that I have been. But I just want people to make good decisions based on good information. So thank you all again.
Well, you're welcome.
Any other last questions or thoughts that anybody has?
I would just like to acknowledge that Sean Burrows at the hospital and Scott St. Clair and Corey Furman and Jen Green at the health department have all played a huge role in helping this community, this area, get vaccines. And they have all been fantastic at helping our community. So they're not here tonight, but those are 4 other people I can think of right off the top of my head that, Wesley, if you want to provide names of people to be in contact with, those are 4 other people that I can think of that are real champions and have a real passion to help our community.
For sure.
And I'm going to just speak up too. I know for all 3 of y'all, in talking with you, that you all express that you're really available to talk to people, to talk to smaller groups, if that's something, if this even could go to a point that it was the people in a church that have questions, I think we can do this.
Absolutely. I, have offered to come and, even if it's just to listen, or to tell my experience as a mom, as a woman, as a physician, whatever I can share, to women's groups or Bible studies. Robyn, you're more than welcome to share my email with everybody. If you just have a quick email question, or if you want to share my email to any of your congregation, I'm happy to talk to anybody, because that's why we're here, is to share information and keep people safe and help people make good decisions about their health. So we're more than willing. I have several Zoom meetings, but I love in-person meetings too, especially if we can do them outside. And I'd love to do that as often as anybody'd have need to have me present.
It's really great to hear. I mean, I think that's what a lot of what we're hearing and have been for the last month or two, that it's really the trusted healthcare providers in the community, the pharmacists and the physicians and the nurses, and other trusted community members that people are going to listen to, and it's going to make a difference. And we just have to figure out how to find those formats to make it happen. So, but I really appreciate all of y'all tonight coming and just being here to talk and ask questions and answer questions. And I think we're all here. I could say for myself, I definitely may not have all the answers, but I can figure out how to find the answers or who to ask. So, please let me know. So Dr. Adams, you put your email in here, so, and Dr. Womack. All righty.